I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a
Welcome to Hard NOC Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
Hey, Brittany, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's been a minute. I overslept Oscar Monday.
I know that you were so excited to talk about the Oscars.
Yeah.
Get a chance. Well, let's take a moment now because you are one of the biggest Oscar nerds at the Nerds of Color. So I just wanted to get your take on the Everything Everywhere sweep and all the other stuff that transpired during the telecast last week.
It was very well deserved. I know a lot of people probably, especially on this channel, have been echoing that, but yeah, it was definitely very well deserved. Oh, I do wish though that the Batman, really feeding into the Nerds of Color got something because it was just kind of like, I think that to me, Batman was the best superhero movie from last year. So the fact that I didn't get usually Batman awards win like sound mixing or editing.
Yeah.
And
Well, not in a Top Gun Maverick. That was the only thing it won. So, I kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going to get it. I was surprised, honestly, that the Whale won Best Makeup. Like when the Whale won Best Makeup, it was like, oh, Brendan Fraser's winning Best Actor.
Yeah.
That was like the biggest clue. But I think if there was a category that the Batman could have maybe potentially got something, it would have been makeup, only because. But then if you think about it, I don't think it's won anything during the whole award season, like all the different guilds and stuff. So it's been overlooked.
But I just think it's so frustrating when it's like, that one was my favorite comic book movie of last year. So for it to not really win anything, that was the only thing that I found a little like, okay.
Well, speaking of comic movies, Angela Bassett did not do the thing after all, and that was a disappointment. Speaking of comic book films.
It's so frustrating because it's like, it's not to say that Jamie Lee Curtis isn't a great actress and not to say that she doesn't maybe ever deserve an Oscar, but for that particular role, no. And I know that's also the problem with the Oscars is sometimes it's so political that people win awards when they're like, oh, they probably should have won this a long time ago.
Well, it was a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I guess the problem is if you're going to hand out a Lifetime Achievement Award that night, probably should have given it to Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
Even if you don't think Wakanda Forever was that great a movie, and it's not our favorite comic book movie of the last year. It's one of the lesser MCU movies, unfortunately. But Angela Bassett did the thing and elevated that role beyond what it would have been in anybody else's hands, probably.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So yeah, I just think if you were going to give it to someone from Everything Everywhere All at Once in the supporting category, should have been Stephanie. She is just so good. And so that's the only frustrating part was like, it should have been, if you're going to pick someone for the movie, it should have been Stephanie. But I'm glad Michelle Yeoh won.
And I think if there's a multiverse, Ke Huy Quan won Best Supporting Actor. You could argue he's a lead actor in that movie.
Yeah.
And then to your point about political, I think they knew if we submit him in supporting actor, he'll definitely win. If he's supporting lead actor, there's more competition. The Brendan Frasers, the Austin Butlers, the Colin Farrells. But I think there is a multiverse in which he was submitted in the lead actor, and James Hong was submitted in the supporting actor, and they could have swept all four categories. But they didn't.
Yeah,
they did sweep though. I mean, they won 7 out of the 10, and they won all of the acting nominations they were in, which is, I think, I don't know if it's unprecedented. I feel like I was reading things over the last week that there Network might have been a movie where there were 3 acting wins, but in the modern Oscar era, that's definitely an unprecedented thing. And the fact that 2 Asian Americans won, or 2 Asian actors won in the same year, that's unheard of because Asians don't get nominated.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I love that Halle Berry was the one to kind of present for her. The only 2 women of color to win
in 95 years.
That is so crazy.
And it's funny, a lot of the conversation around everywhere has been, especially people who are like, I'm so surprised that, swept the Oscars and it's this weird. Everyone kind of glosses over, I wouldn't say everyone, but a lot of the Oscar watchers and the journalists that I read kind of gloss over the fact that it was a movie by Asian Americans, for Asian Americans, with Asian Americans, about Asian Americans, and no one mentions that. Like, that's historic. Can you imagine a movie featuring a marginalized group where that's the main? It's like if Coda won last year and no one mentioned the fact that they were deaf in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, why are people like just glossing over the fact that this is a movie about Asians full of Asians?
Because, they're trying to, I think because it is also a genre film,
I guess.
that it's like, why is that winning? Because, like, again, there's so many other genre films that should have probably won Oscars and have gotten even acting nominations for their films and haven't over the years. So, like, it is unprecedented and really cool and deserving because, again, like, I feel like any movie can be great and worthy of accolades regardless of what quote unquote genre it falls into and all of that. So I love that it happened to be a film with, like, people of color, especially, Asian Americans, because, like you said, it's so rare that, like, we get that or we get to see that. So it's beautiful. So I was pretty much happy with everything. The only thing, like I said, was just like I thought the Batman should have got one something at least. So,
well, there are two things that I wanted to talk to you about that I didn't get the chance to talk to Jeff Yang, who was on the podcast last week when we talked about Everything Everywhere, and it's the telecast itself. And this was the first year post slap, and they kind of they never really mentioned Chris Rock or Will Smith's names. I think they mentioned the slap maybe once or twice in kind of like passing. Reading a lot of the like Oscar journalists over the last week, the consensus is pretty much like it was a boring ceremony, which is wild because like it was probably the most exciting. Again, maybe because I had a movie I was rooting for. It was one of the most exciting Oscar telecasts I'd seen in a long time. I literally like jumped up and cried when Michelle won the Oscar. You know what I mean? I've never done that. The Oscars, but I literally like cheered like I was watching a basketball game. But I thought the telecast was pretty good. What did you think of the telecast?
I thought it was decent. I understand I kind of understood that going into it that they were going to be maybe more tame just because of like how slap was. So I kind of had a feeling it was going to be kind of tamed. So I wasn't surprised. I thought it was fine. And like, yeah, I mean, I cried when Key won because like, he was such a huge part of my childhood because I grew up with the Goonies and like I know that it's like the most racist Indiana Jones movie, but it happens to also be my favorite. I'm sorry, but Temple of Doom is my favorite Indiana Jones movie.
Well, we all have our problematic faves.
Yes, I'm very sorry. I know it's problematic. I'm not gonna even deny any of that. Like, I'm not gonna be stupid, but I still really loved that movie. So he was like, he's always been one of my favorite people as a kid. So like to see him finally get like things like accolades he deserved.
Oh, and I think the reason I was so emotionally invested in Michelle is because I wasn't sure if she was going to win. Like, I think people were predicting, she's the momentum is all hers, but like oftentimes when you have all the momentum, then the backlash comes, and it was between her and Cate Blanchett like the entire season, and I was just geared for them to say, and the Oscar goes to Cate Blanchett, and be like, I remembered when 2 years ago they switched the categories around so Best Actor would be presented last because
they thought Chadwick was gonna win,
and it was like, and the Oscar goes to Anthony Hopkins, and he's not even here. Good night.
Because they wouldn't accommodate for him because he was worried about traveling because of COVID because he's 90 and he's like.
But they didn't think he was going to win. That was the thing. Like they, you can tell sometimes the producers have an inkling, right? Like they're like, oh, this is definitely going to be Chadwick, so they're going to. Normally the Best Actor is presented before Best Picture. Best Picture is always the last award. And that year, I forget which movie even won Best Picture because the big climax was, and the Oscar goes to, and everyone assumed Chadwick since he had passed that year, and he didn't win. And I felt the same thing going into this. Like they had Halle Berry come out, and I was like, oh no. When I saw Halle Berry, I was like, oh, they're signaling that they think it's Michelle. And when they do that, it's always the opposite. And that's why I was like real nervous until they said her name.
Yeah. But no, I'm so glad she won. Speaking of more like kind of like, I guess, I don't know, Asian joy. I've thought the Joyride, is that the name of that movie?
Yeah.
It looks great.
You saw the trailer? It's just a trailer, right? You haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie. It looks great. I'm saying I was gonna save it for nerd popping, but I just felt
it's
like
too good. Well, I mean, it's a kind of a wild thing to think about, like all the Asian American films that are coming out now in the Oscars, Everything Everywhere post Glow, because what I think is cool about Joyride and the other trailer that dropped this week, Beef, with Ali Wong and Steven Yeun. Basically, it's like a revenge comedy. I'm not even sure why they're mad at each other, but like I think they they like cut each other off in traffic, and the whole movie is like them getting revenge on one another.
Okay.
But it's like that and Joyride, which is like a raunchy road trip comedy with 4 Asian American non-binary and women actors. It's like we're getting movies that aren't in the trope of Asian American movies, right? There's nothing about like intergenerational trauma or like not living up to your parents and all that kind of stuff. It's just like a road trip or like a revenge comedy with Asian Americans. And I think that's what I hope is the real legacy of Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
Speaking of legacies, let's talk about the DC universe. Superman legacy. It was announced. James Gunn is not only writing it, he was looking for a director and he was like, oh, wait, I'm a director. And he said, I'm directing Superman Legacy.
I already knew that was coming. I never saw, what's it called, Brightburn or whatever. I never saw it, but like I knew that he was gonna do a Superman movie himself. I already knew. I wasn't like,
weren't surprised.
No. Like I did see his emotional post though saying that the release date happens to be their dad's birthday who hasn't passed away. So I don't know. I like James Gunn despite all of that tweet situation thing. So I'm hoping he'll do Superman justice.
Do you worry though? Like we're going to talk about Shazam Fury of the Gods this episode. It just came out. It didn't do so hot at the box office, and you know there was some worry going into this year 2023, knowing that next year is when all of the DCEU stuff is going to happen, all the Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters stuff. Like all the movies that come out this year, including Shazam and The Flash and Blue Beetle and Aquaman, even though James Gunn in his announcement said, oh no, these are just like, this is just the transition period before we get into the actual launch of the DCU. Some of the characters are going to stay the same, some are going to change. This is what I was actually most concerned about, honestly, is that it would be a soft reset and not a hard reset. You know, like when we were speculating before they even announced, it was like, well, if James Gunn is the president of DC Studios, what does that mean about the Suicide Squad? What does that mean about Peacemaker? Those are firmly entrenched in the DCEU, in the Snyderverse. Like, I'm not one of his critics. I'm like you, looking forward to the new version of the DC universe. But at the same time, one of the early criticisms or the people speculating was like, oh, he's just going to keep his people and can everybody else. And it kind of feels like he's like, if I worked with you in the old days, you're still with me. Everyone else is getting fired. And then Ben Affleck in an article this week was like, yeah, I ain't working with DC Studios. Like he was really matter of fact about like, James Gunn's a great guy, but DC's not for me. Even though James Gunn had said during the announcement, we're talking to Ben, we might have him direct something. And Ben was like, fuck y'all, I ain't directing nothing.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like a good launch is what I'm saying. I don't know how do you feel about this?
I don't know, because of one, WB messed up all of their money from all the other stuff that they were doing, that I don't know if they had any money left to market Shazam. So, because I will say that the marketing for this movie was abysmal. So, and the person who I went to see it with was like, didn't that movie already come out? And I was like, no.
Well, it was supposed to like come out last year, right?
I had to explain, like it was supposed to, but they pushed it back. And so it's just like, so I don't know. I want to have hope that it will go great, but I don't know. It's not looking hot, but it could be more of WB not giving over, you know, the money that DC Studios needed to promote Shazam, or it really is they're just trying to be like, yeah, well, we're not going to be able to do the Black Adam thing. We're not going to be able to do this, so let's just not, like, I don't know. I
mean, we'll talk more about it in the spoiler section after the break, but I was just thinking that, like, one of the maybe missteps that they took was announcing their slate so early, knowing that they had these movies coming out this year. Like, if they knew if they already had their plan, I would have just kept it quiet until at least The Flash came out. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like announcing it when they did, we talked about this back during the Black Adam movie. They announced it the day after Black Adam came out, basically, right? So it was like this whole Dwayne Johnson hyping up Henry Cavill announcing, yes, I'm back. And everyone was like cheering. And then James Gunn comes out the next day with the announcement, I'm the now president of DC Studios, and we're going to have a whole slate. And there was all this like speculation. Is it going to be a reboot? Is he going to continue? And then, 2 months later, it was like, nope, we're killing the DCEU. But then it's like, there's these 4 movies coming out next year. And it's like, it is the DCEU, but it's also the DCU. And then like, that's the kind of confusion shit that like I was afraid of when they announced them. And I was like, don't even announce until you have something that you can release. You know what I mean? Because imagine it, it's like if Disney, or I guess it wasn't even Disney at the time, it's as if Kevin Feige would have said, we have this whole plan for the MCU before Iron Man came out. You know what I mean? Like that's where you fall, because like the Dark Universe and the Monster Universe and all these other universes that never went anywhere is because they tried to announce the universe before the movies came out. And I feel like, as it pains me to say, DC's falling into that trap again.
I hope not. I hope this is just like a fluke, even though they've had a lot of like missteps. It's because I genuinely do want to see DC do well, because like I always tell people who, especially people who don't really read the comics or at least haven't seen like the animated stuff from DC, which I'm more familiar with DC over comics is the animated stuff. But I'm like, they have great characters, they have great stories, there's potential there. And I always tell people that, and like, oh well, like, you know, I don't watch all that other stuff or read the comics. I'm like, yeah, but there is still potential there. DC isn't as bad as you think, because unfortunately the film side is not doing what you think it should be. I'm like, Marvel is great, don't get me wrong, but DC's got good stuff. So, and that's the problem still. I think the general public, you know, unfortunately are gonna for a while associate DC with, you know, they're just not that great, you know. And or they, I mean, Batman's cool, but everything else is just kind of like, you know.
Yeah, which has been always the case, right? Because Batman's the only character that's ever done well in a context of movies. Even as much as they've tried launching their own universe, it's only the Batman movies that have ever succeeded. But and I, you know, I'm a Batman guy as much as next one, and that's why The Flash is like the only one of these movies that they're really putting their money behind, because guess what? Batman's in it.
Yep.
So
2 Batmans are in it.
Yeah, 2 Batmans are in it. So I was very hyped when the DCU was announced, and I'm still excited. I'm not saying I'm not. I liked Shazam, and I'm I'm going to like The Flash. I just worry about the strategy, and sometimes it's like they just like WB can't help themselves and tripping themselves up, and because like again, it was the timing of like the Black Adam stuff, and then the James Gunn announcement, and then the Henry Cavill stuff, and you know, burning the bridge with Dwayne Johnson, because like at the Oscars he was asked like, you know, what happened with Black Adam? And he was like, oh, you know, things happen. And then what superhero will you play next? He's like, I'm done with superheroes. You know, like Dwayne Johnson's like, I'm done with superheroes. Ben Affleck's, I'm done with DC. And it's just like, that just don't look good when like the folks you work with and, you know, not to say James Gunn and Dwayne Johnson work together, but like Warner Brothers and these huge stars are like, nah, it ain't for me.
Yeah. I mean, Christopher Nolan walked away from him too.
Christopher Nolan walked away. Exactly. He walked away when they fucked with him too much, and he was done with them. So like those are your biggest draws to the studio. Like you associate Ben Affleck with Warner Brothers, Dwayne Johnson with Warner Brothers. Well, Dwayne Johnson you associate with a bunch of stuff. But Christopher Nolan is definitely, all his movies up until Oppenheimer were all Warner Brothers movies. Oh, that reminds me. Like I did want to ask you, going back to the Oscars real quick before we take a break. What did you think of like the sponsored content during the telecast? Because there was the Little Mermaid trailer that they dropped like in the middle of the ceremony. It wasn't even like a commercial break.
Yeah, it was. I love Disney. I want to make that clear. I'm a Disney person, but yeah, it felt very much like, hey, let's promote all of our stuff for the win during the Oscars.
What made it so weird? Like I wouldn't have paid it that much mind. I know a lot of people are like pissed off about it. Like you can't. That's like besmirching the Oscars being so nakedly, you know, consumerist or whatever. But like then they had Morgan Freeman and Margot Robbie come out and like introduce a Warner Brothers commercial. Like I remember when they used to do montages, and I miss the montages, to be honest. I loved when they did like movie montages, but it was just weird that like Disney had their like time to promote their one movie, and then Warner Brothers had the same time to like promote like their history, I guess, with a commercial that they had released like 6 months ago. Like I don't even get why they use that time to show a commercial that's been on the internet for a while. I don't know. It was just weird. Like, why not the other studios? Why was it just? Is it just because they're celebrating 100 years? And I don't know. I just thought it was weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for going on that tangent. Let's take a break and talk about Shazam. Just heads up, if you come back after the break, we're going to be spoiling Shazam Fury of the Gods. So if you don't want to know what happens, pause the podcast, come back, and will spoil Shazam for you. So, Brittany,
Yes.
you're a big fan of Paramount Plus, aren't you?
Oh, I am indeed. That is the home of one of my favorite shows, which I know some people I've talked about it. On
Yeah,
before.
you're not the demographic.
I know I'm not the demographic, but the show I'm talking about is obviously Yellowstone. If you don't know, I love Yellowstone, and it's literally one of the most like I'm saying. I know a lot of people like, oh, it seems like it's for like rednecks or something like that. I promise you, the drama is so good. It's just, and if you're a fan of Twilight, there's like an actor from Twilight that's on there.
Well, it's one of the biggest shows in the world.
Yes.
And it's got these like great spinoffs, right? Because isn't 1923 a spinoff of Yellowstone and 1883? Am I getting those years correct?
No, it's 1923. I'm not there yet on the spinoffs.
But it's got like Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. Like,
yes.
It's crazy that those are like actors you get for TV shows.
Tim McGraw and Faith Hill are on the 18 one, if you are a country fan. Which Tim McGraw is honestly a really great actor. Don't know if you've ever seen Friday Night Lights, but he's a great actor. So they're great. Those are great things to check out. I have to wait for my mom and brother to watch it because we are such a fan of the show. Teen Wolf is also on Paramount Plus, and they released a new movie with Tyler Hoechlin is in it and back. So I'm excited to watch that finally when I get around to it. I know it's been like 2 months now, but it's hard to coordinate our schedules.
Well, the reason we're bringing up Paramount Plus is that if you click on the link in the description to this podcast, you can actually stream Paramount Plus for 1 month for free. We're just excited that we get to share Paramount Plus with all of our listeners. So click on the link that you see in the description and stream Paramount Plus for free for a month. Try it. If you don't like it, you can cancel. But if you love it, if you love Yellowstone, Teen Wolf, Star Trek, all of the Star Treks are on Paramount Plus. Do that and you'll help us out in the process. So back to Shazam. I love the first movie, as do you.
Yes.
And I will be honest, going into this, the trailers did not do this movie justice. I liked the movie.
I like the movie too.
The trailers were terrible.
Yes. I was very concerned that I was gonna not like this because I loved the first one so much. It's one of my favorite movies and Christmas movies. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I hope this is good. And I will say, though, it is obviously not as good as the first one.
Mm.
But I think it's a decent sequel. It's great. It still got me to cry. I enjoyed every bit of it. Yeah.
What was it about the trailers that made you think it wasn't going to be so great? Because I like I said, when they first released the trailers for the movie, I was like, ooh, I don't think I'm going to like this movie. It
didn't seem like it was so focused on like family, really, even though like, it is actually, but like from the trailers, and that's what I think what made the first one was that little family unit Billy ends up having, and it made me concerned that it wasn't going to be that. It still is focused on family, it's just not in the same respect. I do think they could have had a little bit more emotional moments in dealing with like what was going on in the house with his new family. I think they could have focused a little bit more on that, to be honest, in this one. But yeah, it just felt like it was going to be like him, he is just setting up that he's gonna fight a dragon is pretty much what like the trailers were looking like. So I was like,
I'm glad actually there's a line in the trailer that I was like, ugh. It was like the punchline of the trailer where he was like, I just threw a car at a dragon, I love my life. And it was like, that's how, like, I don't know, as a punchline for a trailer, it was just like, that's such a cringy line and it's delivered poorly. And that just gave me a bad feeling. That line's not in the movie, so thank God, right? Like that's not even in the movie. But it was just, it was something about Zachary's performance in the trailers. I will say that I don't love his performance in this as much as the first movie. Like there's still a separation between Asher Angel and Zachary Levi that I don't know is intentional. Like I think this is the case in the first movie, but you don't really think about it too much because it's like, well, it's like Big. It's a kid in a grown man's body. He's going to act a little weird. But he's been Shazam for 2 years now, and there's still like this. Shazam is so stupid in this movie. But like Billy doesn't come off as that stupid when he's Billy. You know what I mean? There's just like when Asher Angel is playing Billy, he's a little bit more like, I don't know, like there's like a sadness to him, and there's like like he's not goofy. But as soon as he's Zachary Levi, it's like he's not, basing his performance on Asher Angel like at all. And that's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, there is more of a separation. I feel like that's why I was more invested when it was Asher, honestly, because then it's like you said that he is dealing with the sadness of realizing that he's aging out of
Right.
the system and that they might not want to keep him because he doesn't know what it's like to be kept by people
Right.
who
He's always
he loved.
abandoned.
Yeah,
And he won't call his adoptive mom. He calls her Rosa the whole movie.
yeah.
That's why that packs an emotional punch at the end when, spoiler, he calls her mom. That's the part I got teary.
Yeah. Ugh.
What would you say was your favorite performance in the movie?
I always love the boy who plays Freddy.
Jack Dylan Grazer.
That's my son. I love him so much, and he's always. I feel like he's just so good. Everything that he's great in the It movies. He's great in this. He's if you've seen Luca, he's good in that. Like I don't know, he's just such a. There's something about him that makes me like feel like I want to take care of him. I don't know. He's so good, and
he shares a lot of scenes with Rachel Zegler.
Yeah, they're really good together. Their story,
Maria from West Side Story.
I was surprised. I was really into like maybe just because I've always been like, oh, I love that kid. So I was very emotionally invested in what was going on with Freddie.
I was surprised by Helen Mirren's performance. Again, from the trailers, like that scene at the cheesesteak table, it just seemed like it didn't seem like it would be any good. But I thought Helen Mirren was really, really good in the movie.
Yeah.
I will say I'm a little disappointed in Lucy Liu. I thought she would be much better. And she, like, I don't know, she just kind of delivers her line like a cartoony villain the whole time. And I was hoping for more from Lucy. I was excited to see Lucy Liu in a superhero movie.
I wasn't sure if it was the writing of that character or she just felt like, you know how there's those actors are like, this is a paycheck, so I'm just gonna...
Yeah, it's like I totally got that vibe, and it was just like, oh, that's disappointing.
Yeah,
as much as I don't like Quentin Tarantino movies, you know, she's such a memorable villain.
Yes,
Kill Bill.
Yeah,
she doesn't bring any of that energy to this role. It was just like kind of dry delivered, because the dialogue is terrible. Let's face it, right? Like the Daughters of Atlas dialogue is all terrible, not good dialogue. But, you know, like I said, Helen Mirren gives it a gravitas when she's delivering it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Lucy was disappointing. And I love Lucy Liu. Like, she's my favorite Joan Watson. And
I was just like, and the fact that she was giving such like not the best performance that she could have, that it just felt like, oh, she really is like a dragon lady in this.
Literally.
Like literal, like I was just like, oh.
How about Jaimin Hansu? The wizard gets way more screen time in this movie than in the first.
Yeah. I just read his thing too the other day.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he's such a good actor.
So, Brittany, you're referencing this interview where he basically said since being nominated for an Oscar, he hasn't been able to make enough money to say he's like making a living off of acting. And it's been almost 20 years since he's got an Oscar nomination,
which is crazy. And he's
insane.
So good. And he's another actor in the film who like genuinely is, you know, even if the material is not your favorite, he's at least giving it his best.
Yeah.
You know? So he's so good. I also loved all of his scenes with like Freddie.
Yeah. Yeah, they spend a lot of time together. Yeah. Actually, they spend the most time together. Like they have a good back and forth kind of buddy comedy chemistry.
I would like to see the two of them do something else together. It doesn't even have to be, you know, Shazam related. I would love to see those two do
I doubt we'll get any more Shazam movies.
So I know we're not. Pretty much. Which is so frustrating because the first one was so good, and then now this one was a decent follow-up, and so it's just like it's
Well, let's talk about like what I think are the three biggest spoilers, and they all happen at the end of the movie. The first spoiler is that David Sandberg, the director, he gets a little cheeky with the cameo from the first movie, where if you recall, the big cameo at the end of Shazam is that, you know, Shazam brings Superman to the school to have lunch with Freddy, and the camera pans up and it cuts off at his head and then fades to black, and everyone, you know, got pissy about like, why can't we get a real Superman cameo? So anyway, so Wonder Woman has a cameo in this movie a couple times, and they cut off at her neck or they show her from behind, and you think to yourself, oh, this is going to be another situation where they couldn't get Gal Gadot, so they're just using a body double. And the first time they play the joke is there's a dream sequence that Billy has, and then the wizard's head appears on top of
I screamed so
Wonder Woman's
loud because I
body.
didn't expect that to happen. It got me. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting them to even show the face, whatever. And then
Right.
all of a sudden, and I screamed really loud because
I mean, I thought it went on a little too long. Like, like Jaimin Hansu's head on Wonder Woman's stunt double body because it wasn't Gal Gadot. Like, it was a funny gag, but then it just kept going. And I was just like, I mean, let him be the wizard. It's like you got your joke and it kind of overstayed its welcome. But at the end of the movie, just spoiler, Shazam dies. Like, literally dies. They bury Billy Batson in the ground. And the magic of the staff is worn out, and everyone's like, there are no more gods to give us magic. And you think to yourself, is that really, they're gonna kill off Shazam, really? And then you see the Wonder Woman body double show up again, but this time they pan all the way up and it's really Gal Gadot.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when you saw Gal Gadot?
I was very surprised. I didn't think that because, pretty sure that she's not going to be Wonder Woman anymore.
Well, yeah. What we talked about with James Gunn earlier. Is she even Wonder Woman? Here's why I wasn't surprised, because I'm making a big deal about the spoiler alert of the cameo. Apparently, there were commercials showing that scene, like TV commercials for Shazam with Wonder Woman in the freaking commercial. Like, it's giving me the Henry Cavill vibes again, where like Dwayne Johnson was pretty much like, please see my movie because Henry Cavill's in it. They're all like spoiling the Wonder Woman cameo in the commercials before the movie came out. Come on, Warner Brothers.
That's crazy. I didn't even see that TV spot, but
good thing you didn't. I saw it, and then I was totally not surprised when Gal Gadot showed up. So it kind of ruined it.
I didn't see it, so I didn't think she was gonna really show up just because of the first like scene. And then when I saw her, I was like, oh, okay, but they're not gonna like show her face. She's just gonna give it power and walk off. And then she actually spoke, and
yeah, she had like a whole scene. It wasn't even just a cameo. She had like a whole dialogue and everything.
I was like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
But isn't it wild though that like the three original Snyderverse trinity, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, and Ben Affleck, they're all going out with cameos, basically, right? Like Henry Cavill did the thing at the end of Black Adam. Now he's gone. Gal Gadot did the thing at the end of Shazam. Chances are she's probably gone. And then, as we said earlier, Ben Affleck's like, I'm done. And he revealed in that interview, I'm only in Flash for 5 minutes, which kind of like made me sad because I was hoping there would be a little bit more Batfleck in the movie.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm only in it for 5 minutes. So like he's got the longest cameo of the three, but it's still just say what you will about the Snyderverse. I wasn't a huge fan, but it is a little sad to see that like the way that the Trinity's going out is a little kind of sus.
As I said, I've always said not a huge fan of Zack Snyder, but I do think he's a great caster. Like he should be casting director, not just a director, because he's really good at picking his people. So it is unfortunate that it is going out this way though, because they were all great casting, honestly.
I mean, I wish like if you're not going to do a hard reboot anyway, right? Because James Gunn is saying like John Cena is still going to be around, and my wife is still going to be around, and Viola Davis is still going to be around. Like if you're keeping a lot of the actors, I think you and I agreed on this back when Black Adam came out. Like, ideal state is actually giving Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, like a better direction to take the characters that they were playing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like Henry was so excited, like I'm going to be a hopeful Superman now, and like, well, the fact that we won't get that is what I think is the most disappointing.
Yes.
Whether or not you like the Snyderverse, the fact that you won't get to see them actually live up to the way the character should be.
Yeah.
Speaking of James Gunn's wife, so the first mid-credit sequence is you see Economos and Harcourt from Peacemaker, and you're like, what are they doing? Like Peacemaker and Shazam is not really like the connection you think. You know, like you have the one R-rated HBO series and the one DC movie like explicitly for kids, but it turns out that they're recruiting Shazam for the Justice Society. There's a whole gag about Justice Society versus Justice League. And I actually read in the David Sandberg interview that it was originally supposed to be the Justice Society who comes and recruits Shazam because this movie was going to be tied into Black Adam more.
Yeah.
Like the actual like Hawkman and probably not Dr. Fate, but if you saw Black Adam, Dr. Fate doesn't survive. But at least Hawkman and maybe Atom Smasher and Cyclone shows up to recruit Shazam. And so like the director's basically complaining in this article, like, we built this whole set and everything, and all we could get was, Harcourt and Economos from Peacemaker to do the recruiting scene. And again, it goes back to like, we already know none of these things are going to pan out. Why even have the mid credits other than like, a great what if? But like, it almost feels like, I mean, I get the complaint when people say like, why should I care about these movies that are coming out if they're not going to lead to anything? Like the Henry Cavill cameo taught me back in October that it doesn't mean anything. So why should I care?
Yeah, you're not going to officially have him unless they are going to bring back Zachary Levi. If you're not bringing him over to connect with those characters later on, it's like, well, you could have just kept it with Hawkman and stuff, because it's like, it's not going to matter either way.
Yeah.
But
I mean, but that also shows that there was there was thought behind the Black Adam Shazam eventual movie, right? Because like,
yeah, and there's also a call to a Black Adam suit when Shazam's suit gets completely like burnt up.
Right. And did you did you stay for the end credit sequence? Did you think for a second, like, wait, is that Black Adam? Because you see a guy in prison.
I already knew it was gonna be
okay.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like, but then he never went to prison, so why would he be in a prison? And then it turns out it was Dr. Savannah. I actually really loved that scene because it was a great joke. Because if you remember the end credits from the first movie, Mr. Mind, which is a caterpillar, it's like, I have a secret plan to kill Shazam once and for all. And he tells Dr. Savannah that, but then he leaves and you're like, oh crap, the next movie is going to have Mr. Mind, the telepathic caterpillar. That's crazy. And he's not in this movie at all until the end credits.
Yeah, and he's like, I have one more thing to do. I'll be back.
It turns out like the last time we saw him in Savannah was the last time Savannah saw him. And it took him 2 years to come back to his cell because I have tiny legs and it takes me a while to get places. I just thought that was a funny joke.
Yeah, I thought it was
I
funny
appreciated
too.
it. So yeah, that's Shazam. And like I said, I like the movie. It doesn't matter. It bombed at the box office. Worse than Black Adam did.
That's so frustrating because I do like both of the movies. Like I've said, the first one is obviously superior, but it sucks that this is the end of Shazam.
It's the end of Shazam. It's the end of like, the DC universe as we know it. We'll see, I mean, it's going to be the other thing about the DCU stuff with James Gunn is that it's going to be so long before it comes out too.
Yeah.
Like 2023, as we mentioned earlier, are these 4 DC movies that are not connected. As much as James Gunn is saying, yeah, these lead into eventually, Superman. Like, no, they don't. Stop lying.
No.
These movies do not connect to the new version of DC whatsoever. But then next year, it's only Joker and Batman, 2 Elseworlds movies that aren't connected to the DC universe going forward.
Which I feel like those will do fine.
Well, those will be fine because they're their own thing. They don't have to like.
They're their own thing, and then also I just feel like, first of all, the first Batman was great, and
Joker made $1 billion,
and everyone loves Lady Gaga, so like those 2 films,
they're going to be fine. But again, they're not connected to DCU at all, right? So like by the time Superman Legacy comes out, like people aren't going to give a shit. I mean, if they blow us away with the casting announcement, if they blow us away with the trailer, that's another story. But hell, I love the Man of Steel trailer. The Man of Steel trailer is probably like my 3rd favorite Superman movie, like writ large. Like just the trailer, like the 3-minute trailer is probably my 3rd favorite Superman movie. The movie itself did not live up to the trailer, so I don't even trust the Superman Legacy trailer until the movie comes out, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just the timing of the whole thing is weird, and who knows? By the time 2025 rolls around, Warner Brothers might have been sold to like another company, and then they, get rid of DC Studios. So like it's been known to happen. I mean, Ray Fisher's on Twitter saying that they should fire everybody at DC Studios, even though they did fire everyone from DC Films and replace them with people at DC Studios. Yeah. But he's like, fire them too. Ray Fisher just wants to fire anyone that works for DC.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, Brittany, you already said Joyride was nerd popping. Anything else? Have you been watching Mando? We didn't even talk about Mando.
We didn't talk about Mando, but I guess that will be sort of, my nerd popping was I very much enjoyed. So, like, I think when we talked about the first episode with Vanessa, I was like, it was so good. And then I was like, oh, I felt like it ended right where I was like, oh, there's going to be a little bit more. And that's why I think episode 1 and 2 would probably have flown really well together if they released them on the same night. But episode 3 I loved that episode.
Well, and it was wild about episode 3. It was like it really wasn't a Mandalorian episode. It was like sneaking in this kind of Andor-esque political intrigue on Coruscant episode, bookended by like Mandalorian scenes, which weren't connected at all, other than that Pershing was a villain from the first season, basically.
But yeah, no, I really liked it. I think episode 2 is really good, and then episode 3 is like, all right, this is knocked it out the park with that one. Katie O'Brien is really good.
Yeah, and she's having a year too, because Quantumania was the freedom fighter. I did think that maybe it was episode 2 that we didn't talk about with but that was the one where he was with Grief Karga, or was that episode 1? That was episode 1.
That's one episode 1, yes. I
just thought that the tone of episode 1 was a little like weird because like, there was a lot of like slapstick comedy.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't even mention Babu Frick's people in your episode that
I know.
the little Anzelians were back.
I love those dudes. I totally forgot. I feel like I normally try to rewatch an episode 2 before we talk about it, just so it's more fresh in my mind, and I just never had the chance to rewatch it. And then I felt like it was like such a slow news week, and then all of the news comes out like the
right after.
Week. So I was just like, I felt so bad. I was trying so hard, and it's not even that like me and Vanessa don't like vibe well. It's just we were like, oh,
right. Well, and then episode 2 rolled around. We didn't get a chance to talk about that because the Oscars dominated the episode, and you overslept, but it's all good. Episode 2 was the one where they actually go to the mines of Mandalore.
Yes.
And I will say one thing one complaint that I have about The Mandalorian this season is that I know that there was a cameo previous season, I forget which one, where R5D4 was the droid at Pelly's like chop shop, but I kind of wish they'd never confirmed it really was R5D4, because I don't know, just like it's the whole idea of like making the universe feel too small. Like the random droid that Luke didn't want to buy because it had a bad motivator is actually this important droid. Like I don't know. It's like it's like somehow Palpatine returned, right? Like he could be any droid. It doesn't have to be. Return. Well, but that's a good thing about the Pershing episode. It's like I think we know how Palpatine returns now. It's Pershing.
Yeah, well, I'm still reading. It's taking me forever to read that book, but I'm still reading the Bloodline book about Leia, where she is working in the New Republic, and there's a lot of things in that book that I'm like, I feel like they forgave a lot of people who work for the Empire and let them in, and that's the kind of vibe I was already kind of getting from the book, and then watching that episode, I was like, okay, that kind of confirms where my mind has been. Where I'm at in the book right now, which I would be really cool if one of the characters from that book actually popped up in
it could. What's there popping for me real quick is just speaking of the Flash earlier, the McFarlane Toys announced their line of figures from the movie, and I'm actually not that psyched for the toys because their Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton Batman figures don't really look like Ben Affleck or Michael Keaton, so I'm a little disappointed. What is really cool is that they're releasing a in-scale Batmobile, which is going to be huge, and an in-scale Batwing, which is even huger. It's like 35 inches across. So I'm trying to consider where I would put that thing, because that thing is a monster. But
you gotta get a room just for that.
Yeah, the Flash is the one. As much as I was complaining about DC, I'm still super hyped for the Flash. I will say I finally saw the Flash trailer in the theater, and I felt like it was a little bit different, right? But it's a little different from the one online. Like the pacing is a little faster. Like no pun intended, and there's an extra scene of Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne that's not in the online version. You noticed that? Okay, so I'm not crazy. No,
that's what I said. Like I don't know, the trailers is a lot better in the
theater. Like it's just like a different vibe to it in the theater.
Yeah,
and I feel like they like I said they made it a little bit faster paced because they cut down some of the scenes and play a little bit longer online. I don't know, it was really cool, but there's an awesome shot of Michael Keaton like flipping a switch in the Batcave. And he looks like let's get nuts, kind of crazy. So
I just want to say that they are filming Daredevil Reborn, and we saw our first still of Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock. So I'm really excited. We didn't get to talk about all the casting with that.
I know John Bernthal's coming back.
Yes.
Yeah. Foggy and Karen not coming back.
I really like Deborah as an actress, but I did not like her as Karen. I'm sorry. I did not like
it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I mean, I'm surprised we're bringing Bernthal back because I thought he was like, I'm not doing Disney Marvel, but
I told you he was because Kristen Ritter almost let it slide that they were working on something together that was
So did they officially announce Kristen Ritter too? I thought that was just a rumor.
I thought they officially announced it. Well, they at least officially announced John Bernthal.
Yeah, John Bernthal's the official. I don't know about Kristen Ritter. I've seen
I
some
thought it was
rumors about Kristen Ritter.
Maybe
I feel
not.
bad for Mike Coulter, man. I don't think they're bringing him back, but they're bringing everybody else. I'm not feeling bad for the other defender. I don't even know his name.
They better not bring him back.
They should bring Jessica Henwick back.
Yes,
that's Iron Fist. Jessica Henwick is Iron Fist. Anyway, also wanted to say R.I.P. to Lance Reddick. It feels like 2023. It's been all celebrity eulogies, but he just passed away. You know him from John Wick, The Wire, and it's crazy because John Wick 4 is about to come out. R.I.P. to Lance Reddick, one of the brightest stars in genre films and television shows of all time, and it was sad to see him pass. Anyway, Brittany, how can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hi Brittany Monet on Twitter, Instagram, and Hive. And you can
Still
also
pushing Hive.
Yes. And you can also check out at litroom_podcast for my other podcast that I do with Vanessa. So yeah.
Awesome. Follow me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and at @RealKeithChow on Instagram. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color on all platforms. And go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock Network. Give us a rating and a review if you do. Subscribe to our videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color. Support us on patreon.com/the Nerds of Color. And buy our merch at tpublic.com. Search for the Nerds of Color. Until next time, Brittany.
I'm Captain Everything Junior.
Shazam.